Today, my guest is Ema Patki, Senior Vice President of Product and Platform Engineering and Diagnostics at Align Technology. Ema first started at Align all the way back in 2008, so she knows the company inside and out. She has watched Align become a household name with more than 20 million people using Invisalign alone. I was really excited to speak with Ema because she sits at the intersection of product and platform engineering. By combining these two different areas of the business, Ema has managed to help Align release new features much faster than before. And she's also dramatically reduced the amount of money the company wastes on the cloud. Let's dive right into the conversation. Ema, thanks a lot for chatting with us. We will start with a quick rapid fire.
Sounds
Did not think at all this answer. I think you can ask pretty quickly. AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud?
AWS,
GitHub or GitLab?
GitHub.
Containers or serverless?
Oh gosh, tough one, but serverless.
Build or buy?
Oh my goodness, depends. Can I answer depends? Because it really
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, buy,
Deploy on Fridays, always or never?
never.
Right? You did awesome. Let's get it right into your wheelhouse. Can you give us a brief overview of your tech environment?
Yep,
The team structure at Align.
sure. So, largely I divide the tech environment into two. We have our classic IT environment, which is sort of as, our ERPs, a manufacturing system, CRM, etc. They are cloud-based, mostly on GCP and Azure. And then we have the clinical side of the world, which is really where doctors submit their Invisalign prescriptions, they review their treatment plans, they make modifications to their treatment plans. These are all custom built software, as you can imagine, right, for specific to our treatment plans and to the Invisalign protocol. And they're all based out of AWS. So they're all, so mostly cloud native applications that are based in AWS. So that's kind of the high level of the tech environment. The team structure, our team structure sort of largely mimics our architecture. We have a slew of monolith applications that we've built over the last 27 years that we're in the process of sort of componentizing and deconstructing into microservices. And then there's also microservices that we've just had the luxury of building from scratch as, with their own roles and responsibilities, with their own persistence layer. So the teams are organized by largely these monoliths, right? So you would say the doctor-facing portal, the treatment planning and visualization platform, the backend order management platforms, etc. But what we did do a few years ago, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, is actually set up what we call vertical product teams. We realized that it was getting really slow for us to launch features into market because each feature went across all of these teams, right? And you needed engineers from each of these teams working across those features. They needed to coordinate contracts, solutions, timings, etc. And the number of people that needed to talk to each other to get one feature delivered was just causing us to have a much larger time to market. So we decided to create a team that's focused around the product and around the feature itself, right? And so let's take integration of CBCT into Invisalign treatment planning. We created one team whose sole goal and roadmap was to integrate this capability. And we took people we had to take people from these monoliths, right? There's no other way to make changes. So we took people from the microservices teams, from the monoliths teams, but then we made them dedicated to this capability. And so what happened was they worked with the product manager directly. They learned about the feature, learned about the capability, really became experts in that, and knew the pieces of the code and the technology that needed to be delivered for that feature, right? And over 2 years evolved with that team, right? To the point that we don't have this constant back and forth and switching of engineers that work on things. And they've really learned even within the monolith, they've learned their piece of capability really, really well and are well situated to make changes quickly. But, when you think about cloud costs, it's the same thing, right? This team now understands all there is to understand about the cost of building this capability, right? Because they understand what the machine learning models cost. They understand whether it's is it stateless? Is it long running, etc.? Because they've taken the time to build this capability. So for us, this has been very successful. I've not done it in all the places, Suresh. We still have a long way to go. But this evolution of sort of, whilst we break our monoliths down, this notion of a vertical product team has been very successful for us in getting to a faster time to market.
On the initiative side, so especially on the optimization, I know you have led a few of them, not even a few, a lot of them. Can you name a few and give us some details on the significant impact ones?
Yeah. So, I don't know that I can highlight just a couple. So I'm going to kind of just, I think our journey has been one of many different optimization techniques. Maybe I'll just share a couple of them or a few of them, and hopefully that helps. But for us, what's big is storage. So we get a lot of patient assets, right? We get X-rays, we get scans, we get photos, sometimes we get CBCTs. All of these are fairly large in their sizes. And so working through storage types and optimizing by S3 storage types has been really key for us, right? Whether it's moving from GP2 to GP3, really looking at the network costs of moving data over. Because like I said, we're not all in AWS. We're some in AWS, some in some other clouds as well. And so looking at network egress costs, really architecting for, do we need to move assets around, or can we just give links to assets? That's a big part of what's helped us when we look at optimization, right? We've also looked at other things like VPCs for when we need to, if there's patient asset heavy workflows and services, we sort of built VPCs between the endpoints so that we're not incurring additional costs of moving the data over. We've also looked at, RDS and using Graviton for all of our RDS instances. I think that's helped us save a lot. And then finally, I think waste monitoring for us. So we have a lot of non-production environments, right? Where engineers spin up EC2 instances for some work. They want to test something out. They decide to change the design. They want to do something else. And they don't always, we just have idle resources, right? Everywhere in all of these environments. And we used to have this notion of, this is the waste that will occur just looking at all the environments. A couple of months ago, we flipped it to, this is the waste that has already occurred. It's quite a change, right? You would think it's not a big deal, but when engineers see the waste that has already occurred in, let's say, a non-production environment over the last 3 months, it's really money that you've already lost. Versus if you do something, you lose this. And that has been really helpful, right? To kind of go. And so I would say looking through our non-production environments and looking at the waste has been a huge savings for us. And highlighting that waste to the engineering teams and having them work through it. Yeah. I think those are sort of the biggest areas I can think of in terms of optimization.
Just a small follow-up question. So was it all done in-house with custom tools, or did you use any, do you have any principles or guidelines on certain things?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So we do have guidelines. So we have what we call an architecture review board. And most new programs, if you're doing like a minor change to an existing feature or capability, it's okay. But if you're introducing something new, we have guidelines that we've put together, right? And so guidelines will be, if this is not long running and doesn't have persistence, use serverless. If you are going across clouds for whatever reason, or when you have a choice to make of where to host your service, really think about what the workflow is of the data and design for being in the same cloud if you can, right? So you're not incurring network egress costs. If you're looking at storage, right? Pick the right storage layer. If you're looking at even storage, can you archive? What does your archival policy look like, right? Are you maintaining all data in one storage, or are you able to implement some kind of archival policies? So we do have these guidelines set up. So we have sort of a host of guidelines / patterns that we set up for the teams. And we really do go through that when the program comes for review, right? When the program architecture comes for review, the architecture review board does kind of go through the checklist of sort of guidelines and patterns And a lot of these are focused on cloud costs and optimization, right? And so we look at all these as we review that. Because what we found is it's much easier to point out things and get changes when you're in the design phase versus you've already built it, right? Because then it becomes something you have to unwind. Typically the project team will say, hey, is it okay if I do it in the next wave and the next release? And priorities take over and you don't always make those changes, right? And so having some of these guidelines set out has been good for us, right? And I think it's a little muscle memory. In the beginning, it's hard. After a while, people, even logging and metrics, right? What do you log versus what is a trace and a metric? People put so much in logs, right? And we've really started asking ourselves, okay, why do you need this in the log versus if it's just a metric you want to measure, then make it a metric and you don't need to use your log data and your log volumes for that. So we're getting better little by little every day with some of these guidelines and patterns, but we found that's a good way of sort of instilling things while they're being designed so that unwinding doesn't have to be done.
Now, on to the team dynamics. When you launch a new initiative, how do you get the whole team to rally behind it?
Yeah. Very rare. It's not often that we get the whole team. So what assuming you've got the business case, right? So the biggest thing is the business case. All of us have to be convinced we want to do something, right? So that, I'm sure, like every other company, we work on a business case, right? And we put together key success metrics we want out of it. And we make sure that we're convinced we want to do this. But just because the sponsor of the program is convinced they want to do it doesn't mean you can rally an entire engineering organization behind it, right? And so what we look for is typically the early adopters. So I'm sure you've seen the adoption curve of, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So there's always some teams that once the initiative is approved, want to be the first ones on it. Either because they believe in it, they see value in it, they want to learn it, they don't nothing about it, they just want to learn. And so that's the team we'll take to walk through the kinks. Because when you're launching something new, 100% there's going to be issues, there's going to be teething pains. And it's super hard to have a team that sort of doesn't want to get on board, right? Be your first quote unquote customer for this initiative or first user of this initiative or first even engineering team that's building it out with you, right? So you want to pick the team so we do actually spend some time figuring out who am I going to work with on this new initiative, right? Who's going to start it? Who's going to work on it? If it's a platform team that's built a product or that's building a product for the engineering teams, then they really work with those engineering teams and we pick the people that are most vested. And whatever your reasons for being vested are, right? Your interests, your goals, etc. What we've seen is then you iron out the kinks through that. You get through all of the teething pains and you get something that's better matured. And then you get the next set of group of people on it, right? Who maybe don't have the time or the motivation to spend as much, but are now using something that's more mature. What we found is by the time you get to the sort of early majority, most of you've kind of past that inflection point where some of the naysayers, some of the people that, didn't necessarily see the value in it come on board. And honestly, our FinOps initiative has exactly followed this, right? When we kind of got the executive sponsorship on this and we decided we're going to go after cloud optimization because we realized that we're moving all of this to the cloud, right? We were like everyone else, desktop based. Doctors used to, plan their Invisalign treatments with software on their desktop. So when we moved it to the cloud, we realized that, and there's so much computation, right? There's so many machine learning models that are running everywhere. We realized that if we don't sort of put in a practice and a principle of cloud optimizing the costs, we're going to we won't be able to have a handle over it. We did get the sort of sponsorship on the FinOps side. We set up a really small team. And then it's exactly that, right? We found the engineering teams that were interested in learning the techniques of how you can optimize costs, the tools that you can use to look at what your current run rate is and, dashboards that you can build and look at. And then sort of, have the capability to understand their architecture, tie it back to these optimization techniques, and actually build and actually do make a difference, right? Go optimize, go showcase this. And then once that team that's how kind of the FinOps practitioner concept was born at Align, right? We really started realizing that there are people who are interested in learning and interested in sort of going back to their teams and being the champion for the effort. And that's how we grew it. It went from a small team showcasing the success to more people wanting to get on the initiative, more people wanting to set up FinOps practitioners. And then, once you get past a certain inflection point, I think everyone either gets on board because they see the value, or honestly, they have no choice. Because now the critical mass of the movement is enough that it becomes a goal for everyone.
Yeah, clear. Now that you have a FinOps practice in play, right? I know for me, at least there are two parts to it. The first part is really figuring out what needs to be done or where is the wastage. That's part one.
Yeah.
Part two is really getting stuff done without incidents, right?
Right.
And you have been extremely successful in both, right? How did you get to do that?
I think some of this was, like I said, setting up these FinOps practitioners and, having them be the evangelists, if you will, back to their teams. So working with our FinOps teams, understanding the optimization techniques, going back to the engineering teams and evangelizing that change. We have monthly operating reviews where teams get to showcase the optimizations that they made, right? So FinOps is a standing topic at every monthly operating review. Our engineering leadership attends that with me. They'll showcase what optimizations they've been able to make. Does two things, right? One, nothing like healthy competition to show what savings you did and, brag a little bit about what you did, but also give the other engineering teams an opportunity to learn from what was already successfully implemented, right? I think teams tend to be much more open to doing something if, I don't have to take a lot of time to figure it out. Someone's already figured it out. Oh, I saw that you got that many savings from it. I have a similar use case. Perhaps I can try it out. So I think these monthly operating reviews really help in allowing the teams to sort of showcase their work. And then, at the end of the day, I think it's on everyone's goals, Suresh. Like it's not, we've made it so that when we write quarterly goals and annual goals, constantly thinking about how you're going to optimize costs is a goal that's on your performance goals, and it's a key part of what you have to do. So I think all of that combined together, sort of having these practitioners with the knowledge, showcasing your work, and it being a goal, it kind of comes together nicely, where we've been able to, affect that change in people. But I'll tell you, it's been, I think most engineers, at least the ones that focus on cloud optimizations, they've actually really liked the fact that they're always learning new techniques, right? And they're learning new ways to optimize. And before you know it, it becomes sort of part of what you do, right? So I do think even for their own growth, there hasn't been as much pushback, right? But I think all these factors have helped us get there.
And when you make these when you execute these optimization, was there ever a concern about performance or to some extent even availability?
Yeah, there is. And, we're pretty careful about that, right? So for us, doctor and patient facing performance and user experience is really key, right? We have doctors all around the world that use our software. Their bandwidth constraints and, availability differs, right? Depending on which way you are in the world. And so I think if an optimization, let's say moving to Graviton might be cheaper, but it's going to be performance issues. And especially performance in that it's visible to doctors or patients. And particularly when they're, doing treatment planning and other sort of things that they do all the time that they cannot afford to have a latency in. That's a compromise we make, right? So that's somewhere where we'll say that we're not going to make this optimization because it might help on a cost side, but it's going to hurt on the performance side, right? So to me, anything that's doctor facing that takes away time from their clinics and their day-to-day work and introduces latencies there, or is a suboptimal experience for our patients, that's not something we want to compromise on, right? But then again, we have lots of workflows that are asynchronous in the back end, right? That where, a second delay doesn't matter at all, right? And the workflow allows you to be asynchronous. It's not, you're not waiting for assets are moved somewhere, you're doing something else in the workflow. We know that a second or more added to it is not going to be a problem. And those are the areas where we really focus on saying, hey, we can optimize this piece, right? So I think for me, the lens is customer and patient experience should not be degraded, because that's something we've worked really hard over the years to optimize. Right? We have so many doctors saying, hey, it's great to see that your ClinCheck opens much faster, right? I'm able to work much faster on this. I'm able to make changes and I can see that there's no latency as I'm moving the tooth or I'm intruding the tooth. That's not a place that I want to compromise on. But lots of opportunities, we have so many workflows in the back end where there's all cloud services that participate in that workflow and certainly can optimize those.
And now there is an automated aspect to optimization, right? So you can automate stuff in. And generally, we are, as a company, we are a big fan of being autonomous, right? And the way we define autonomy is generally a little different from the rest of the industry. We call autonomy when we are really helping people. We say, you know what? We don't want to throw anyone under the bus. If you're making an optimization, take the responsibility of it, right? Because the tool is recommending it, the tool is optimizing it. Now, if there is a human even looking at it, the responsibility becomes the humans, right? That's our philosophy. What is your take on that, right? What is your take on AI? Since you're deep in AI and ML now, what is your take on that technology helping you with optimization?
Yeah. I think it's inevitable. I think it has to be done. We've reached in our optimization, we've reached things that we do over and over again, right? Because we know that it works. We know that it optimizes. We know which services can afford that optimization, which can't, because perhaps performance is a concern, right? So if I had the ability for the autonomous agents to make these changes automatically, or even in the beginning, flag those to me and have a human, tell me that this is okay to go ahead and do.
Yes.
Over time, as you gain confidence, you let the system itself take care of it. Think about how much more time the engineers would get to focus on either building out new features or figuring out more, I guess, harder ways of optimizing that aren't so obvious to do, right? So to me, and we've embraced this throughout, right? If there is something that you can automate on, give it to an autonomous agent to do, and it allows you to do it confidently while you focus on something else that I call more value add, then you absolutely should do it. And by the way, that's the way we're headed, right? And that's what I mean by inevitable. I think there's no value in fighting it, right? You want to make sure you embrace it and figure out how can you have these agents do it for you, right? So even like our deployments today, there is somebody that approves them, right? So we go through this change request board. We were doing a math on how many times does the change request board say no to a change? It is very, very, very low, right? Most of the time, everyone's done the due diligence. They know the impact. The board just goes, yep, it's approved, right? So we've started now a process where some deployments are automated, right? Because you literally know that this dimension of what you're trying to deploy does not break production. We know what it is. And even if we've got monitoring in place that we could roll back if need be, the risk is low. We're trying to automate the deployment of those things, right? Because it's like, why do you need somebody to go approve this when historical data is showing that they've never rejected it, right? And there hasn't been a degradation or issue in production. So I would apply the same theory here, right? If you know that there's an optimization that time and time again works, why wouldn't you let autonomous system do it for you? Some of it is confidence of knowing that this is going to work in production, which is why we have a workflow where perhaps in the beginning you have a human approve it. But everywhere, right? We were using security systems that are detecting vulnerabilities for us, that we're letting them fix it for us, right? I think it's the same thing here, right? In where if you could detect optimizations and do it in a way that you either know you're confident that there's going to be no adverse effects in production, or you can find out immediately and roll back, right? Like that's also okay. I'm also okay with, in certain cases that are not critical, taking the risk of making the change and having enough monitoring and telemetry in place, which tells me that this thing didn't work, and rolling it back. If that percentage is low of the rollback, then again, I've won, right? Because I've saved time from the humans that are approving these changes. So to me, it's a progression we will get to. So I think you're better off figuring out how to use it to your benefit sooner than later.
Perfect. I think this is exactly what we expect from a leader who wants to use AI. So awesome. Question. Generally, AI is a threat, right? I've seen at least teams sometimes feel that I have to upskill, or in some cases, this might take my job away, right?
Right.
So how do you handle that?
We talk about that a lot, Suresh. I think I think it's inevitable. And our theory here is you got to embrace AI. Yes, you got to upskill. So 100%, right? You've got to learn capabilities that are coming out in commercial off-the-shelf tools and SaaS applications, if that's where you play. If you build custom apps, then you've got to figure out how to use developer copilots, right? And to your benefit. And what we tell the team is rather than be threatened, and there are some people that are, and there's a bunch that aren't, right? That just love using these capabilities and say, why should I be spending my time writing unit tests or generating documentation? I don't want to do that, right? And so rather than be threatened, figure out how you can actually leverage these technologies to deliver value, right? So customer care. Is there an agent you can build for customer care so that doctors, when talking to our customer care agents, are either talking to chatbots or helping the agent find information faster, right? Helping our current customer care person find information faster. Sales, right? Can you use agents for AI guided selling, which help our sales guys and gals actually point out to doctors solutions that are more relevant to their practice, right? Not everything that we offer is relevant for everyone, but really understanding what is your practice, what is your growth goals, how do I help streamline your clinic? Could be maybe there's 2 offerings in the whole aligned digital platform that make sense for you, right? So how do I make that AI guided versus the human person, the salesperson having to plot through a flowchart in their mind, right? So same thing with, how do you make the doctor's treatment planning experience more streamlined, right? Is there something you can do there? So I think the message to our engineering teams and everyone has been figure out upskill, learn the AI technology within your platforms, learn what is possible, use developer copilot. And now that you've had that, figure out how you can deliver more value to our customers by using what's already there, right? And so if you use what's there and you build on top of it, then there's no question of losing a job. There's no question of being threatened, right? On the contrary, you're actually delivering things that are truly value add and helping your customers, right? And I think when you look at it with that lens, most people seem to come along, right? Because it's really, and we enable that, right? We also have things like AI hackathons at work, right? Where we allow people to take time from their day-to-day schedule and their day-to-day project work. You take a week off and you think of use cases that AI will help in, and then you get some time to go prototype those, right? And so you spend a little bit of time possibly before the hackathon learning and upskilling, and thinking through use cases. But then guess what? That week, you're off the hook with your projects. And you get to focus entirely that week on building, prototyping and building. And out of the 10 things the teams might build, maybe, 3 or 4 will actually go into production and get into the hands of doctors and patients, right? Or even our internal employees. And so I think we've kind of given that message, but we're also allowing people to get upskilled and learn. Because otherwise you can't have where you're working 100% of your time on your current technology, your current programs, and you don't have the time to learn what's available out there, right? What has Salesforce done with their platform, or what has someone else done? So I think it's a combination of those two, and we'll see. I think hopefully that will allow people to sort of embrace it rather than feel threatened by it. And at the end of the day, I think you have to figure out how to use it to your benefit, right? And each engineer is different, right? I've really got some engineers who'll be like, oh, I don't document anymore. I just give it to the copilot, right? Or I don't write unit tests anymore. But hey, I'm not letting the copilot write my complex code, right? That I want to focus on. And that's fine, because there's probably a good chunk of your time that got saved by not writing documentation and unit testing, right? And so I think we're on that journey. It's certainly a mixed bag of reactions when we get through it.
100%. In fact, if AI can document it, generally you can almost not document it too, because the other person can really get the documentation on the fly, right? So it's easier, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So generally, people are getting used to AI being there. Generally, when Sedai goes in, we always tell operators, right? It is not easy to really replace anyone with AI, right? What we can essentially do is all the things that you are doing otherwise, like called oil, like super term oil for you, like the risky ones for you. That's the one we are trying to make autonomous, not the ones where your intellect is. It's hard. It's extremely hard
Right.
to really figure stuff out, right?
Or you augment the experience, right? You do
Exactly.
You find, let's say Sedai finds things that, or it detects things, it highlights things. Maybe you don't have the answer on how to optimize it, but maybe you highlight it to the engineering team. And now the engineering team does research, looks into that and says, oh, wait, now I understand what's broken. It wasn't, there's no way a platform could have found that out, because it perhaps needed to go into the application design and look at the design. But whatever you highlighted allowed the engineering teams to go look specifically into that area, right? And now the fix needs to come from them. It's not something that's automatically fixed. But imagine augmenting that whole experience, right? Versus it would have been in production, it would have caused issues, you wouldn't have known until you'd probably overrun costs or something, or performance was bad, etc. Right? So I think it's also augmenting the experience for you overall.
Exactly. And generally, when we talk about set of one-liner, we say, you know what, our theory is really taking admins out of harm's way, right? So if you make a change and that breaks production, and then you are on a call figuring out why things went wrong, we are trying to just avoid that. It's never about the other side.
You have traceability, you have, everything in place, right? So we get on severity calls. The first thing people ask is, hey, what changed? And then you have this whole series of this change, that. Oh, wait, when did this change happen? Oh, you go. It's like, you know what the platform tells you? It tells you what changed. It tells you what time the change was made. It tells you why the change was made in reaction to what. It's so much easier, right? I think people just have to get to being able to use all of the tech and findings.
And Emma, we were talking about the engineers now. Let's talk about the leadership. Right?
Yeah.
What is your advice for the leadership about our mentoring their team towards AI future?
Here we talk about building an AI-ready workforce. That's kind of our new terminology, if you will, within the company. And it really is, right? It's, as leaders, how do you help your team get to where they're AI ready as a workforce? So I think some of this is allowing them to upskill, right? And learn the tech. Some of this is allowing them to think about when the kids who are graduating from school now, right, from comp science, they probably would be aghast if they joined a company that did not use copilots or did not use developer assistants or did not have some amount of AI in everything that they do in the software lifecycle, right? Because that's what the kids are learning in school. I mean, my son uses Copilot for almost everything, right? He starts with Copilot first and then says, oh, I had AI generate this, what do you think, right? I don't think he writes anything himself anymore, right? And so for that workforce that's graduating out of schools to come join Align and be in a team that's not ready to take them in, you're probably going to lose them, right? And so I think even asking yourselves, what do we have to do? Yeah, to upskill ourselves, but what do I have to do to be ready for this next generation and the set of people who join Align that are expecting? That's actually quite powerful, because you realize that if you fall behind, you're hardly going to be able to attract good talent, right? So as leaders, that's what we think about as well, is how, when I'm interviewing someone for a role in my team, what am I going to sell them with? And if they ask me, hey, what AI capabilities do you have within the company today, within the technology stack, within my day-to-day work, how are you going to make it more productive for me so that I'm not doing sort of the toil work, as you point out? Imagine if we had no answers to them, right? I can't imagine we'd be able to sell ourselves to them. So I think part of it is also looking at it from that lens, is how do you enable better talent to join your company? Right? Whether it's fresh grads or otherwise, this recognition that talent isn't going to join if you're not AI ready. For me, it's giving the team the opportunity. One thing we found is if you don't allow them to learn and give them programs and projects and initiatives that allow them to do this. Not fair, right? You can't tell them, hey, you got to be an AI ready workforce and expect them to continue at the same speed and the same process and tools that they've been using to date, right? You have to give them time to educate themselves, train themselves, learn, and then figure out how to best use what's available. It's hard, right? Because it typically means some drop of productivity in the name of a gain of productivity at some point, right? Because people are learning, right? They're learning the new tech and new capabilities. So as leaders, I think you have to also be invested in that, right? You have to be willing to let your teams work through that, see what works for them, doesn't work. We've run a GitHub developer copilot, for the last year, and we've kind of, gotten good results. And now we're trying to figure out, okay, how do you expand the adoption of it, right? Yeah, there's a certain section of people that are using it, and we know what they're using it for. How do you now enable them to use it more across different teams, et cetera, right? And some of that is education, training, awareness, allowing people to take the time to learn. I think but it's got to come from the leadership, right? It's got to come from where you are able to enable your team to be AI ready as a workforce. And it's some of the things we're doing, yeah.
Ema, now that we have learned a lot from you, now the next question, where can we learn more about you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it anything else? Any platform else that we should go?
I think LinkedIn is the best. There's a bunch of posts there on previous podcasts and sort of summits and forums that I've been part of and spoken at. But yeah, my experience is also there. So I think LinkedIn would be a good place.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. It was super fun.
Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Ema.